The range went dead silent. Not a single breath, not a whisper, just the kind of silence that makes your chest tighten and your throat close up. 23 active duty Marines stood frozen, their weapons lowered, eyes locked on the old man at the firing line. He was 95 years old, his hands trembling slightly as they gripped the worn wooden stock of an M1 Garand, a rifle that had seen more battles than most of these young men could ever imagine. And in that moment, everything they thought they knew about courage, sacrifice, and what it truly means to serve was about to be shattered. His name was Vincent Speranza, though most people just called him Vinny. He wasn't supposed to be there that day. The invitation had come as a surprise. A local Marine Corps shooting range had heard about the old veteran living quietly in their town, and they wanted to honor him. But Vinny didn't want honor. He didn't want a ceremony or a plaque. He wanted to feel the weight of that rifle in his hands one more time. The same rifle he'd carried through the frozen hell of Bastogne during the Battle of the Bulge. The same rifle that had saved his life more times than he could count. The same rifle that still haunted his dreams 79 years later. So when the Marines offered him a chance to shoot, he accepted, not for himself, but for the brothers he'd left behind in the snow. The young Marine instructor approached him carefully, respect etched into every line of his face. "Sir, we can set you up with a modern rifle if you'd prefer. Something lighter, easier to handle." But Vinny shook his head slowly, his weathered fingers running along the barrel of the Garand like he was greeting an old friend. "This is the one," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is the one I need." The instructor nodded, understanding something unspoken passing between them. He stepped back, and the other Marines formed a semicircle behind the old veteran, watching in reverent silence as he loaded the rifle with practiced ease, muscle memory from a lifetime ago, kicking in like it was yesterday. Vinny's hands steadied as he raised the weapon to his shoulder. His breathing slowed. His eyes, still sharp despite his age, focused downrange. And then he fired. The crack of the M1 Garand echoed across the range, a sound that hadn't been heard there in decades. One shot, two, three. Each one found its mark with impossible precision. The Marines behind him exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from polite interest to genuine awe. This wasn't just an old man shooting. This was a master at work, his body remembering every lesson learned in the crucible of war. 4 shots, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then the distinctive ping as the en-bloc clip ejected. A sound that had once meant survival, that had once told him he had 8 more seconds to live. He lowered the rifle slowly, his shoulders sagging just a fraction. One of the younger Marines, a lance corporal who couldn't have been more than 22, stepped forward to check the target. What he saw made his jaw drop. Every single round had hit center mass. Perfect grouping, perfect execution, but it was what happened next that no one expected. The lance corporal turned back toward Vinny, his eyes glistening with unshed tears, and without a word, he came to attention and saluted. Not the casual salute of routine military courtesy, but the kind of salute that comes from the soul. Sharp, crisp, and trembling with emotion. And then, one by one, every Marine on that range followed suit. 23 hands snapped to 23 foreheads in perfect unison. The range officer, the instructors, the privates fresh out of boot camp, the staff sergeants with deployment patches covering their sleeves, all of them standing at attention, saluting a man who had earned that respect long before any of them were born. Vinny stood there, the rifle hanging loose in his grip, tears streaming freely down his weathered cheeks. He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come, because in that moment he wasn't at a shooting range in 2024, he was back in Bastogne. He was 20 years old again, surrounded by men who would die before they turned 21. He was cold and hungry and terrified, but he was also alive. Alive in a way he hadn't felt in decades. For them, he finally managed to choke out, his voice breaking. Every shot was for them, for the boys who never made it home. The lance corporal, the one who had saluted first, stepped forward again, and this time he did something that would have gotten him reprimanded under normal circumstances. He wrapped his arms around the old veteran and held him as he wept. And not a single person moved to stop him, because they all understood. They understood that this wasn't about marksmanship or military protocol. This was about honoring a debt that could never be repaid. This was about recognizing that the freedom they defended today had been bought with the blood of men like Vinny and his brothers 7 decades ago. As the sun began to set over the range, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that reminded Vinny of tracer rounds arcing through the winter darkness, the Marines gathered around him. They didn't ask for war stories or tactical advice. They simply stood with him in silence, their presence a bridge between generations of warriors. And when Vinny finally handed the M1 Garand to the range officer, he did so with steady hands, the trembling gone, replaced by a sense of peace he hadn't felt since 1945. "Thank you," he said simply, looking each young Marine in the eye. "Thank you for remembering. Thank you for carrying on." But it was the lance corporal who had the final word, his voice thick with emotion. "No, sir. Thank you. Thank you for showing us what real courage looks like." The range remained silent long after Vinny left, his old rifle carefully preserved in a glass case where it would serve as a reminder, not just of one man's extraordinary skill, but of an entire generation's sacrifice. And every Marine who had been there that day carried the memory forward, a living testament to the truth that some debts can never be repaid, only honored. Some stories never end. They just find new voices to tell them.